In today's video, we're going to be talking about the 1999 to 2002 full-size GM cluster, specifically battery drain issues, and that is where with the key off, the key out, and the truck off, maybe you come back a few days later, you have a dead battery, and you've traced it back to the cluster drawing power when it should not be drawing power. So first things first, the only circuit that should have power with the key off and the key out of the ignition is the orange wire. If you have power on one of the other wires, say one of the pink wires, or let's see here, looks like brown is also an ignition wire. Well, that'd be this one here. If you have power on these with the key out, then you have something wrong with your ignition switch, or you have a weird wiring issue. So you should only have power on the orange wire when the truck is off. So right now I have the cluster powered up with only the orange wire, only the orange circuit is active right now. And that is on this power supply here. Let me see if I can get everything in view. So here you see it's drawing 0 amps and it is connected to just the orange wire. So that's good. That means so far it's working properly. Now there are 3 different things that can cause the cluster to draw power through just this orange wire. And the first thing is if you just want to check the odometer reading. See when I push that button, see now it's drawing 0.62 amps. That will time out after a few seconds, you see, so there it's back to 0. So if I push it again, it will draw about 600 milliamps for a few seconds, and then it will go back to sleep. And there it's back to 0 again. The second thing that will cause it to draw power when it shouldn't is if something is trying to talk to it. If the bus communication, the CAN bus is telling it to wake. So right here, I've just given it CAN bus, and as you can see, it's not doing anything. It's off. There's no displays. It's not live, but it's drawing 600 milliamps because this bus is telling it to wake. And when I disconnect the bus communication, you'll see after a few seconds it'll go back to sleep. There. Okay, now we're back to 0 amp draw again. And now the third thing that will cause this cluster to pull power through that circuit is if the security is tripped, and I can just do that by turning it on and off without the CAN bus. Might take a couple cycles here, but I should be able to get a trigger. Oh, come on. I might have to wait a minute. There, security is on. So as you can see, we're pulling power again, 0.6. And it's only connected right now. Only the orange wire is live. So one of these 3 things is happening to this customer, because that is his complaint. As he says, the cluster is killing his battery. So out of those 3 possibilities, I doubt the customer is sitting in his truck all night pushing the odometer trip button, draining his battery. So that would leave either security is triggered or there's bus communication activity going on. And he did not say anything about the security showing, so that just leaves there's bus communication going on for some reason. I don't know why, but something in the vehicle is trying to talk to the cluster, and it's keeping it out of that sleep state. Now, I don't know the reason on what is possibly trying to keep this thing awake in the truck, but what I can do is I can kind of brute force method it, I guess you could say. We can just make it so that this cluster cannot communicate to anything when the truck is off, which I don't see why that would be a problem, because there's really no need to communicate to the cluster when the truck is off. Usually if you're going to check your codes, plug into your OBD2 port and read your codes, you have to have the ignition on anyway, so I can't see it interfering with anything like that. I have talked it over with the customer, and he wants me to go ahead and modify this cluster. Now, just to be clear, this started out with the customer's truck having battery drain issues, and he traced it back to the instrument cluster. Now, I don't think there's actually anything wrong with the instrument cluster, because right now, as I'm hooked up powering the orange wire, and I have 0 current draw. And the only way I get key off current draw is if I try to talk to it through the CAN bus. So that tells me something. The vehicle is taking this thing out of sleep for some reason. I don't know why. If somebody knows why, please comment down below, because this is a bizarre issue. And also, if you have a 2003 or 2004 cluster with battery drain issue, that is a completely different cluster, completely different problem. So that would be on a different video. Hi, Katie. This is the relay I'm going to use to switch in and out the CAN bus. There we go. It's actually the same relay used in the Dodge Tip-'em, the totally integrated power module. So if you do a search in that part number, you'll see that come up. And I'm going to mount it right there, so that way it fits inside of this unused cavity right in here. There's not enough depth or empty space anywhere else, but there's plenty of room in this unused indicator spot. Before I get started with the relay, it's always a good idea to reflow the VFD header pins. It's usually not a matter of if it's going to fracture, but when it's going to fracture. So take care of that while it's apart. Relay mounted. To start with, I did have to make one cut to the trace where the CAN bus comes in and goes to the daughter board. Let's see, the cut is right. I don't know how well it's showing up. The cut is right there. So that forces the CAN bus to go through the relay contacts before it can go to its destination here. Actually, right here on the daughter board is where this trace that I cut ends up going. So this is the bypass path here. It goes through the relay. And to power the coil of the relay, this W2 jumper right here is ground. So I just have a jumper going up to one side of the coil. Other side of the coil can go right in this location here. That is that's ignition 1 at that point right there. So that powers that's the positive side of the coil. There is this little black box right here. It's just a diode, a reverse polarity diode to snub out the inductive kickback noise from the coil. It's not necessary to function, but it's there to just kill off any the spikes coming off of the coil when the coil's de-energized. Some sensitive electronics don't like that. Anyways, let me reassemble and I will demonstrate. All right, well, I can't quite put it together yet. I got a couple gauges that need a little dampening oil added. These are a little too wobbly, a little too bouncy for my liking. Volts is good and oil's pretty good. Temp is good, RPM is fine. Just mile per hour and volt need a little help. Or I'm sorry, that's not volt. The fuel need a little help. Oh, also right in here, I should probably mention that this piece of tape and a little bit of a conformal coating is in this area, because right in these black areas is where the plastic sits down on, and it kind of just butts up against the board. Doesn't quite make contact, but it comes close, so that's why there's a little bit of protection here, so these wires don't wear from the plastic being on the top of them. As far as adding dampening oil, if you're wondering what and how I'm doing this, in my older videos I cover how to add a little bit of a dampening oil. Well, it's technically a grease inside of here, but you can't take it apart once it's assembled, so we're only left with adding oil. So I'm sucking out the air and replacing it with heavy oil. There we go. Yeah, see, that's better. And now to test out the modification, and keep in mind the relay can be removed, and that cut I had to make and the trace can just be jumpered with a solder blob. Okay, so right now I am powering the orange wire. Ignition is shut off. CAN bus is hooked up, and I'm pulling 0 amps, which is good. So I'm going to go ahead and turn on the ignition. And you see we have CAN bus communication because our temp and fuel gauge are working. So that's good. And then we're going to turn off the ignition. And it does take about 15 seconds for the clusters to go to sleep. So in about 10 more seconds, that should go to 0 if it's working. There we go. We're at 0 current draws. So this will not drain the battery. CAN bus is still connected. It's still communicating. but it's ignoring it because the path is open now from that relay, and the security light is not lit. Um, it's good. It's no longer pulling power. So let's turn the ignition back on, and there we go. Working, powered up. CAN bus is working, and we'll turn off the ignition. And again, in about 15 seconds, when it goes to sleep, we'll go back to 0 current draw. And any second now, there, 0. And I can still use the key off odometer check. I can still turn on the odometer and it will pull power for a few seconds until it shuts off, and then it goes back to sleep. So it is working the way it is supposed to now. It's not just consuming power just sitting there with the ignition off. Now, what I did today is a plug and play option to where the customer just has to plug the cluster back in and it will work right now. But there's no reason why what I did couldn't be done externally right here at the harness, because you can just make the same cut to the CAN bus wire, and you have your power, ignition, and grounds all right here to run just a standard automotive relay. So while this is nice for the end user to be able to just plug it in and not have to solder or wire anything or look at wiring diagrams, it technically could be done externally too. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you all next time.